So, hi everybody. Welcome to the Influential Leader Breakthrough event. We're just joining on LinkedIn live just now. There we go. And hello everybody on LinkedIn. Lovely to have you joining the Influential Leader Breakthrough event. Bear with me one second. So a big welcome. My name is Louisa Weinstein. And I'm really excited to take you through this method. And I've got some really exciting announcements for you a little bit later on as well. Just let in someone here. A little bit about me. After years begrudgingly working as a corporate lawyer, because I thought that successful people stuck to hard things, I found myself in a community mediation class in an attempt to solve my managerial shortcomings. And I immediately fell in love with the mediation methodology because it provided the building blocks to enable influence and create innovative, constructive conversations, ones that I wasn't really even allowing myself previously to have, never mind the teams that I managed. So if you're here, then you're a leader or executive who wants to lead with influence to motivate your people and win over clients, and thereby increase revenue and curate a collaborative company culture. We're going to be focusing on how to do exactly that over the course of the next few days using negotiation skills, emotional intelligence, and next level communication, as well as influence. This is the beginning of a different way of working in which all the people challenges at work will start to change. At the end of the event, you should feel more able to improve relationships even when tensions are high, overcome challenges with clients and partners to create new opportunities and impact revenue. You're also going to be able to approach difficult conversations with and negotiations with confidence, and so achieve more profitable and essentially better outcomes. You're going to be able to engender self-motivation even when people seem disempowered. Essentially, I always say I want you to be the next Logan Roy from Succession, and if you haven't watched it, you really need to. I want you to be him, but nice. You'll understand when you watch it, or at least with principles. And yeah, as I say, if you haven't seen it, go away and watch it straight away. It's a brilliant, brilliant lesson in negotiation. Make sure that you stay till the end today, whether you're on Zoom or on LinkedIn Live, just to let those people on LinkedIn Live know that if you want to access the Zoom, it's in the event link, so you should be able to do that. But I have a very exciting announcement for you all at the end of today's session. So today we're going to be talking about creating optimum buy-in. We're going to be looking at the dynamics at play that can prevent buy-in and potentially upset the apple cart, so that you can understand the dynamics that are going to be influencing your communications, negotiations, and relationships, and you can then be in control of them. But for now, I'd love to know from you, what are the signs of not buying in? How do you know that someone's not buying in? What are they doing? Comment in the box if you've seen situations where people, for example, don't respond to emails or just don't get back to you, or they say yes, but they seem to mean no, or other examples where people just aren't engaged. I've got an example that I often refer to. I was brought in by a client who wanted to implement a big change that was going to change the way the organization delivered its solutions. Sorry, I know that a couple of our people are experiencing techie issues. If you are, then you can you'll be able to access the recording. So yeah, as I say, I was about to implement a big change process. It was going to change the way the organization delivered its solutions. The change had been agreed in principle by the board, but the commercial director was really concerned about the impact of change on his team. The sales director was driving the process. He was leading a presentation with the sales and commercial teams, and he was doing it at an off-site venue. And one of his team had forgotten to take the box containing the presentation packs to the venue. So he needed to find someone to drive it over. The commercial director had a car and was driving, and the sales director asked him to take it over, and he said he would, but then he left it and blamed the head of sales for not checking. Now, was that intentional? Wasn't it? The fact of the matter was that he wasn't motivated to go out of his way to help. And the small smirk on his face that the sales director saw indicated to him that it was intentional. It's petty and it's funny to us, yes, but it's one of the clear signs that something's wrong and needs to be addressed and acknowledged, so we can start to move towards a place of cooperation and motivation. I see you've got some examples here, or an example. So people are, dismissive or flippant. So almost like what you say doesn't matter. So if you don't consciously create buy-in, what happens is that tensions quickly escalate, and when that happens, they can soon move out of your control. Resentments and misunderstandings can quickly and easily brew, and we can alienate team members or clients. The other thing is that people aren't motivated to self-motivated, and they start to want you to nanny them. In fact, they can get quite upset if you don't. I'd love to know if any of you have seen this happen. Oops, I'm just, sorry, excuse me. Slight tech issue here as well, so apologies. So yeah, it'd be great to know if any of you have seen this happen. Nannying right frequently. So is that you nannying, or people expecting you to nanny, to tell you what to do? It's so frustrating. Thanks for that feedback. Right, yeah, people expecting you to nanny them, just kind of leaving it, and when they do that, they infantilize themselves, and it creates a really unhelpful dynamic. So, by the way, lack of collaboration is reported to be the biggest problem that teams face. Collaborating saves about £1,200 per manager and team member per year, and collaboration's quality improvements are worth £2,000 per year per manager and team member. When you start to get to grips with the dynamics at play, and through that you create buy-in, people then becomes more self-motivated, so less needing to be nannied. They want to pull with you. You also have consistently clear expectations and boundaries, and the conversations can begin to be more creative, and you as a leader can feel more confident to lead your teams, and that they're more with you. It's much easier then to have otherwise somewhat difficult conversations about money, performance, or whatever it may be when that's in place. So is that something you want to achieve? And if it is, just put yes in the box. So while you're doing that, now we're going to dig in a little bit into how we start to get to grips with creating that optimum buy-in. But before we even start, I want you to think about creating a safe space. What is that to you? What is a safe space for you? An environment where you feel safe. How do you create it? What does it look like? I would say that here, this session is recorded. Day one is on Zoom. So I understand you guys aren't going to necessarily want to talk about specifics, but even here we can create somewhat of a safe space, in that we're looking at creating a non-judgmental environment. We're probably keeping our opinions about other people and advice to ourselves. Many of us are professionals. We're used to giving advice all the time, but actually there's a huge value in withholding that advice, and really to create a space to think. So let's now get into some of the detail of what we need to look at to create that optimum buy-in. We've talked about safety in this context, but we also need to think about creating a safe space for us and other people when we're in that environment. And it's really, really powerful to do that, and to understand what that is. But what we also need to do is understand and accept what conflict is. A lot of us, won't think that conflict is necessarily relevant. It doesn't necessarily happen, but it's a real key to understanding what's going on, because actually conflict is in the little things. We might call it a crisis in human interactions, but that's on a scale. It can be a small crisis. It's in any event a lack of unity. It really demonstrates that we're not working together, and when we're not working together, we can identify that there is conflict. And it's a big word. We don't like to use it, but the more we can use it, the more power we have over the conversation. In conflict, there's huge opportunity for change. Essentially, I want one thing, you want another, and in that, there's an opportunity to explore alternatives that we're resistant to. So, that resistance in itself as well is very it provides a lot of information. And conflict's a process. So something will happen, an antecedent condition, and it'll turn into a kind of melting pot where you've got in it emotions, perceptions, behaviors, and it begins when one of us thinks that we may not get our way, or we haven't got our way. A lot of perception in there. So before we even start in terms of looking at a situation where we want to gain buy-in, or where we want to develop influence over someone else, we need to seek the conflict. Where's the, and if you feel more comfortable with the word, we need to look at the tension. Where are the tensions? Because in that, we will be gaining valuable information. So where do we start with that? Well, really, we need to look at ourselves and other people's reactions and responses in situations that are tricky. So generally, people have 5 key responses when things get more tricky, when things get tense. And in some of our programs, we look into that in a little bit more detail. Really understanding yourself and others in conflict or tension situations is extremely important to turning that situation around. So we've got generally 5 key responses. We accommodate, we collaborate, we compromise, we avoid, and we compete defeat. Now, on the surface, most of us will understand what that means, but let's look into it a little bit more deeply. And if any of those responses initially look relevant to you, you might want to put it in the box. You might want to just start to explore it and enable us to start to talk about it. So when we accommodate, that can look very helpful. Certainly, when we're British, it can be very polite to let the other person have what they want, to say yes, to give the other person their way. But actually, when we're dealing with someone who accommodates, yes, to begin with, that might look interesting, that might look helpful. We might be, just be able to bulldozer. But actually, when we're dealing with an accommodator, we've got to be careful, because what we don't want is someone that says yes and means no, and is maybe talking about us or talking about the situation behind their back, who's not really asking for what they need, who's not opening up ideas. And so we tend to struggle more. So that's interesting, Mark. Thanks for sharing. So you think you're far too polite and accommodating because you want to avoid conflict, but actually it doesn't necessarily avoid conflict. It can embed. Hi Emma, nice to see you. If you could put yourself on mute just for now, and I'd love to see you. In fact, I'd love to see all of you. if you want to put yourselves out there. So yes, accommodate. When we accommodate, we might think, oh, hi, that's lovely to see you, Emma. We might think, oh, well, I'm avoiding conflict, but I'm not. What I'm doing is I'm often deferring conflict for a later date, because the other person's going to feel my frustration, and my resentment's going to brew, because I'm going to be thinking, well, I'm being nice to that person, and they're taking me for granted. So if you're dealing with someone that's accommodating, again, as I say, you need to prod them. You need to really encourage them to tell you where they're not happy. It's often a really interesting dynamic where an accommodator meets a compete defeater, because a compete defeater is someone who just goes for it. They know what they want, they say what they want, and they often get what they want. But again, they're not liked, and they're surprised that they're not liked, because a compete defeater will often think, well, I know the way forward. I'm going to help everybody see the way forward. This is the way forward. Let's just go for it. Everyone follow me. You might accommodate, but what you're doing again is building resentment around your team. So often, and often on these calls, we often have a lot of collaborators. So what does a collaborator do? A collaborator will go deeply into the situation, explore the opportunities for win-win, really seek to understand the other person and be understood, so that any solution is really comprehensive. That all sounds great, right? But it takes a long time. So if you and not everyone can handle the time, but also the depth that we might go into when we collaborate. So particularly, lovely Marks, again, you love collaborating and working as a team, as part of a team, to achieve a common business goal. Totally. When that works, when we're really looking deeply into a situation, when we're really opening up about ourselves and our motivations, it's really joyful. But it does take a lot of bravery. When I collaborate, it means that I have to tell the other person how I see their perspective. I might be telling them how the impact that it has on me. I might tell them that I'm not sure about it and I'd like to talk about it. There are lots and lots of risks in collaboration, and because of those risks, again, we need to take time. So do I call you Lorna or Angarad? Let me know. But so you're a collaborator. As a business change manager, yeah, you'd have to be, because you're seeing everything. Right, but you take the flak from execs high up where the projects don't move quickly enough in their eyes. Okay, so they're going to be maybe more compete defeaters. So when a compete defeater's dealing with a collaborator, what you're going to need to look at is the compromising, is the letting things go. So compromising, we think, is great, and it is. They're all great, but we need to look at the things that we need to do is, first of all, look at our most comfortable response. How do I like to respond? And we, in our later programs, we look at more deeply about how you can really drill that down. But then also, what is the best response for the situation? So if, God forbid, someone's coming at you with a knife, the best response is not generally to collaborate. It might be in some situations, but it's not generally to collaborate, right? It's maybe to avoid or compete defeat. So I need to look at the situation that I'm in and choose my response accordingly. So maybe, with the execs, because of the execs, you might need to move to more of a compromise situation, or you may need to, what you will need to do is understand their position. So for example, if they're compete defeaters, you need to say, look, I see that you want things to be done quickly, but we've got a couple of then give them a couple of choices. I can do it more quickly, but if I do, I might lose the sales department or the operations department, for example. I might lose key players of this team. Is that a risk you want to take? Right? So give them the options of taking the approach that they want. They want you to compromise. So what are they going to have to give up? So for example, you know, and all these situations are a negotiation. You know, if I want, you know, say I want a beautiful house, I want my house done up, and I want, you know, all the, you know, everything done in gold, and all the taps done in gold, and all done with the most amazing finish, but I want it done in 3 weeks at a budget, you know, that's kind of £200,000 less than you're quoting. So, you know, I'm going to have to compromise. I'm going to have to make my choices. Like, same with our approach. So Unger, I'd love to know what you think about that and how that might apply in the situation. The other type of response we have is an avoider. Now, I used to go crazy when I was confronted with avoiders, because I'm, as you might have guessed, probably more of a collaborator. I'm also can be in certain situations. So when I'm at home, I'm very much a complete defeater. You know, let's get everyone fed, let's get everyone, you know, safe. You know, I have teenagers, so keep everyone alive. But then we've got avoiders. And avoiders won't necessarily want to go into great depth, and they might be more sensitive. Now, avoiding can be a really good response, just to take a minute to think, to, you know, we never think we've got time to work through situations, to respond. You know, some people say, oh, take 3 days to respond to that person, and it is the most brilliant response when we're in a really tricky situation. But we think, oh my goodness, what can happen in those 3 days? You know, the world could collapse. You know, I have to deal with it now, with that kind of compete defeat person. But so avoidance has a really good, you know, particularly if we're going to take advice from someone else, you know, moving away from the situation can be incredibly powerful. And if you're a collaborator, it might be a useful thing to practice, just because it's so uncomfortable. But when you're dealing with an avoider, and that's what we get often, you want to, you know, the non-response to emails, you need to think about how you're going to engage them. And what I'd suggest, there are various techniques that you can take, and depending on your avoider, but with an avoider, you need to let them know that there's a specific amount of time that you need for them, or a specific subject, so that you're not going to come in and kind of take over all their time. You want to, you know, talk about whether you can talk, or you know, can I take 15 minutes of your time, or can we talk about whether we deal with email? You know, find a subject that is easy to agree on with an avoider, just to engage them in, to make them feel safe, that, as I say, you're not going to hijack their time, or you're not going to be talking about, you know, 60 million issues that they can't deal with. So break things down for an avoider. So really the key in these responses is, first of all, to understand your most comfortable response, the response that you go to, your go-to response, your comfortable response. And then look at the situation and question, is this response the most useful response in the situation? So it's my most comfortable one, but is it the relevant one? And then, most importantly, look at how you see the other person responding, not to judge them, but to understand them. If you say to a compete defeater, I understand that you want to get things done, and that you always, you know, make the decisions, and they're generally the right decision, but in this case, I'd like you to take a little bit more time to explore this, then the compete defeater is less on their hackles, more likely to warm to you, to move towards you, to give you what you want. So, you know, the key is understanding ourselves first, and then understanding others. Let me know if you've got questions on that, or even pushback. I'd love to know. So moving on, I understand that we're, you know, covering it very quickly, but there's a lot more to look at. So on the other end of the scale, we need to look at the dynamics that we are playing in while these situations are going on, because the more we understand, one, the conflict, 2 are responses, and 3 the kind of underlying dynamics, the more we're going to create the conditions for optimum buy-in, even just by accepting where we are in the situation and where the other person is. So what do I mean by dynamics? There's a brilliant book that I would recommend alongside my book, 7 Principles of Conflict Resolution, called The Games People Play. It's a book by Eric Berne, and it covers a topic very simply called transactional analysis, around which looks at how we interact with other people during the course of the day. And during the course of every day, we take on 3 main roles: parent, adult, and child. And we move in and out of these roles during the course of the day quite fluidly. I would actually add to that adolescent, because there's a kind of, I think, adolescent in all of us that I'd add into that, you know, that's impulsive, that's kind of low on the executive skills function, maybe, that's rebellious. But we need to understand that in ourselves and in other people, there is there are these dynamics. Oh, okay, Omar, thank you for that. Right, so so interesting. So you mustn't avoid someone for 3 days in Islam. That's prohibited. Okay, so that's so fine. It's an example, 3 days, but it's very, very interesting. But I think about think about how you're engaging with that other person, and think about just taking a pause. The other thing is, I'd say, just because we're not talking to the other person, or just because we're taking a pause from the other person, it won't necessarily mean that we're not thinking about them. We're engaging with them, we're thinking about them, but we're just taking time with them. And maybe just reduce that to 2 days. Obviously, you've got to adapt it to your situation, but thank you so much for sharing that. Very interesting and very useful. Very useful.
It's like a limit, a deadline to solve the problem.
I like that. I really like that. But I think that's very powerful. But for me, I want to solve the problem in 15 minutes. So, I'm doing a disservice to the other person if I don't take that pause, and to myself. So, but yeah, I think that maybe that's where we get the 3 days, because maybe it's not beyond that time. Because when we do avoid people more, for a long period of time, it does have an impact, and it has a negative impact. I mean, I know that when someone's not responding to me for a period of time, I can get frustrated. I can turn that frustration in on myself. So really useful and good to think about. Okay, so moving to the dynamics that we're playing, with. So when we take on these roles, so I'm going to start with the parent role. So initially we might think, well, parent, that's a good role, that's a caring role, and it may well be. What we have to understand is that we're not just playing these roles outwards, we're also playing them inwards. So we have a parent inside of us who may be offering unconditional acceptance, hope, optimism, soothing when we're in a difficult conversation, but it may also be rules orientated. You must, you should. And we can transfer that critical parent, for example, to the other person, or we can be too nurturing. And as Angarad was referring to, we become that that nanny, and we can slip into it. We can, someone might invite us to behave like that, and then we kind of grab that invitation because it can make us feel responsible. It's much easier to do things for someone else than to enable that person to do it for themselves. It's, that becomes more frustrating. So that parental role is quite interesting. And when we're in that parent, like, do this, do that, or let me help you with this, let me help you with that, in a way disempowering the other person, what happens is that instinctively the other person moves into child. So for example, if I'm saying, oh, you need to do it not like this, but like that, or, just that's okay, but, do it a bit better. I can be a bit, bit critical in an attempt to help. That person can become a little bit more afraid that nothing that they do is going to be right, that they need to check everything with me. And so they move into that child role. Oh, well, you're not letting me, or I'm going to get it wrong, or I'm afraid. So, or they become that, and again, we need to look at that child role inside of us. What am I in at the moment? Am I being creative? Am I in the best of my child? Am I being playful? I mean, when we are at play, when we're in that mode ourselves, when we're the child at play, we bring really good decisions. We're not attached as much to outcomes or necessarily what people are thinking about us. We're spontaneous, we connect to feelings about things, we get excited about things, all great stuff. But also we can become, very reactive, very, very childlike, very easy to upset. So we need to be aware of the state that we're in. And also be really, really aware that if we don't think that we're child, for example, we need to look for that, because it's operating subconsciously. And what's also really interesting in terms of what operates subconsciously is that I'm going to react to your parent or your child without even knowing it. So, when you're in a role of child, I might click to my role as parent without even thinking about it. So I need to become very aware of that. And obviously when we do that without getting too deep, and I'm certainly not a psychologist, we get our buttons pushed, and it's not really the other person's fault. So where do we want to be? We want to be in the role of adult. We want to move ourselves to a place where we can plan, we can see where we are, we can see where the other person is, we're observing, we're organizing, we're adapting, and we're thinking logically. Because when that happens, we're able to become much more objective about the situation that we're in and what to do about it. But we're also less likely to be influenced by the mode that the other person is in, and more forgiving of their mode that they're in. So, what we're likely to do straight after looking at this is to think, oh, well, the person I'm working with is, being such a child, or the person I'm working with is, really trying to parent me. When we're an adult, we don't make those judgments. We observe. We say, oh, it's interesting. They look like they're taking a parental role, and I'm probably reacting them in a child role. So let me move to adult. Let me think about this. Let me accept where they are, and decide where to go next. So can you see your responses in any of this? Can you see a tendency? I'd love to know in the chat, what your most comfortable response might be. What is it then? Can you share it with us, Natalie? Just by the way, I was thinking, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, I'm in parent mode. Oh dear, I'm in parent mode. I shouldn't be in parent mode. And my demonstration of being in parent mode, or how I was being in parent mode, was that I was saying, it has to be done, and it has to be done now. But actually, I realized that I wasn't in parent, I was in child, because I want it now. I want it done now. So we can really confuse the two. We can really, because parent feels a little bit more acceptable. It, feels a little bit more grown up. It might feel a bit closer to adult, but actually beware, because often when we think we're in parent, basically neither of them are particularly helpful. and actually we might confuse one for another. So it would be, I'd love to know kind of where those, if you feel safe, but it's fine if not, where those things come out. Right. Okay. Yeah. So when people spoke to, yeah. Okay. So have been spoken to as critical parent and behave like an adolescent. So when people are critical, we and that was the same. Brilliant. We start to react, don't we? And it's so interesting that you say I feel less creative when that happens, because that adolescent spirit is a very creative spirit. Okay, it's, you know, it's, as I said, maybe lacking in the executive function, the ability to plan and organize and to be less impulsive. But, you know, sometimes that impulsivity, well, often that impulsivity, you know, is brilliant because it has such great creativity. Yeah, that criticism really hits us. And I don't know about you, but we also have that self-criticism that then, you know, if we're in that self-criticism, it often transfers to the person. You know, if I'm up on a deadline and I'm criticizing myself about not achieving that deadline, and then someone else is is also not achieving that deadline that I'm working on with them, I will speak to them in the same way that I'm speaking to myself, in the same critical parent way that I'm speaking to myself. Yeah, it's really unhelpful. So really great that everyone's starting to think about kind of where they are. I'm just looking at this comment. So if I find myself behaving like a critical parent, I get very cross when the other person behaves like a child. I think being more aware of your behavior with these roles in mind could be helpful in some situations. Yeah. When I'm in a critical parent, I'm generally thinking that I'm right, and I'm responsible, and so therefore that other person is wrong and irresponsible, and it's infuriating. And as you say, when we just can observe, so the starting point for the adult is observing, and also, you know, if we can see, oh look, they're in parent, I know what that's like to be in parent. Oh, they're in child, I know what that's like to be in child. Immediately the sting goes out of the situation, because I'm not angry with them for being in their parent or child, because I get it, so I can move on, forgive them, and get on with what I need to get on with. So I'd love to know if you've got other kind of thoughts or ideas about, you know, your roles in that, in terms of what we've spoken about. I mean, sorry, 1 second. Where we also want to move to is to move to a place of empowerment and recognition, where people aren't, and I should have had this slide for today and I've got it for tomorrow as well, but we're going to look at it much more deeply tomorrow, where people are no longer a victim to you, but they're taking responsibility, and we're no longer a victim to them. I mean, the word victim is a really difficult one. None of us want to be victim or seen as victim, but sometimes we choose the victim role. You know, this is happening to me, you know, it's not fair, but they're acting like a child. What am I supposed to do with that? We're disempowered in that situation. Tomorrow we'll talk about how we can hear that disempowerment in other people and turn it around, but we need to accept it in ourselves. I mean, I think that idea of thinking of ourselves as the victim takes a lot of thinking about. But it is, along the line, empowering to accept that sometimes we choose to take a role as victim. Obviously, sometimes we are victims, but sometimes we choose to take that role. When we're empowered, we feel like we can do something and we're in charge of our own destiny. tomorrow we're going to be looking at this more, as I say, but the other key to turning around these situations is moving to a place of recognition. And that is moving from a place where we feel like we're not understood to a place where we can understand the other person. And as I say, we're going to be looking at that much more deeply tomorrow in terms of how to get to that point. So today we're able to step back and start to think about our strategy for dealing with the other person. Tomorrow, we're going to be looking at a really effective framework to start to engage with that other person and to have those tricky conversations, partly using empowerment and recognition, as well as techniques to engage the other person in that conversation. I want you to take some time to think about homework. Think about a current or past situation that you've been in where things have gone out of whack. It doesn't matter whether it's an ongoing situation or whether it's a situation that's already happened. Actually, you know, learning from past situations is extremely powerful. Or looking at them, taking them as examples is extremely powerful, because we can you know, we're not in the heat of the moment. So think about those situations. What were the trigger points for the escalation of that conversation? Think about that. For example, were there threats? Was there a referral to a higher authority? Did someone go AWOL? What would you have preferred to happen? And then think honestly about what role did you play and what role did the other person play? I then want you to think about, if you were an adult, how might you have responded? So tomorrow we're going to have a great giveaway of the 7 Principles of Conflict Resolution, which is a practical support to help you resolve disputes, diffuse difficult conversations, and reach agreement. So do your homework tonight, and great participation tomorrow will get you that prize, as well as participation in the session. But today, just thinking again, we've been looking at setting up the dynamics in our favor, because when we do that, we really can turn around the situation. Building an awareness of the roles we play, our reactions, as well as the other person's, and gaining a perspective as a result. So we're going to tomorrow work on those brilliant conversations. Now, just bear with me a second. And just while I'm fiddling around here, do you have any questions, any specific questions or specific situations, or do you have the issue in mind that you're dealing with? Because I will be emailing you as well with full details of that exercise. For the announcement, I promise you an announcement at the end of this session. I'm really excited to launch today the Negotiating Difficult Conversations e-learning. It's absolutely packed with content. We're not going to have another one of these influential leader events for quite a while. So you've got some of the information from this event, plus loads and loads and loads more. It's packed with content. There's one-to-one support and there's coaching. And it's for leaders and managers who want to confidently lead through challenges and negotiate win-win agreements, but ensure that it's not just you that's doing it, but also the people around you are doing it too. So details are in the link. You can take advantage of it, £125 discount if you book today. That's open for a little while. Details are in the link, and it's an amazing program that we've been working on for a while that I'm super excited about, and you're the first to hear about it. So have a look and you know, share it with your friends. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow and exploring, getting into the depths of those tricky or not so tricky, hopefully, conversations. Thank you very much for joining me, and let me know if you've got any questions.